Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Wisdom Through Bitcoin podcast. I'm your host, Chris Bobe. I have a very special guest here with me today. I'm super excited to talk to Tyler Campbell. He is an expert on hardware devices and bringing your Bitcoin into self-custody. He is a member of the Unchained Capital team down there in Austin, Texas, and they're doing incredible work helping people become more self-sovereign and taking their own financial futures into their own custody. Tyler, how you doing, man? Thanks for coming on the show.
I'm doing fantastic. It's a Friday. I'm helping people set up their own keys, taking control of their own Bitcoin, and I get to go on your podcast. So it's going pretty great for me right now, I got to say.
Great. Hey, just to get us started here, give us a little bit of a background on your experience at Unchained and how you got into Bitcoin.
Yeah, for sure. So right now, my current role is I'm a VP of Concierge at Unchained Capital. So I do run our concierge team. What we focus on is helping people take their Bitcoin that they maybe bought on exchanges, and we help them to secure it with their own keys so they can then use maybe our Bitcoin native financial services. But at a minimum, they know they have the absolute best security for their Bitcoin, where they own their Bitcoin. And so that's what I am passionate about. That's what I do on a day-to-day basis. Now, my road to get here, though, so it's kind of wild how it all started. I reflected on it quite a bit, but I did. So I'm not from Austin, Texas, although that's where I live currently. I'm from the Midwest. So I did go to college up in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I graduated from school. I was looking for, with an economics degree, it was kind of my formal background. So this traditional economics, Keynesian economics was quite heavily taught, I'm sure everywhere, but especially in Minnesota. And out of school, I wanted to work in technology. So lo and behold, the really popular and hot technology in the mid 2010s was blockchain technology. So I first started as an implementation consultant out of college. I worked as an implementation consultant for a software company that was doing private blockchains, believe it or not. So was not in the Bitcoin world yet. I was kind of, enamored with the technology of it all. And so I was working for good people, nice company with good goals, but was really not, purely into Bitcoin at that time. And it was around that time that there was the 2017 bull run in quote unquote cryptocurrency. Everything was going up. And so like a lot of people, I had disposable income for me for the first time in my life because I was now out of school. And I decided to buy some cryptocurrencies with some of my savings. And that bull market then, came to kind of an end, and everything, ended up going down and crashing. And for some reason, and this is where I try to rack my brain to figure out why, but for some reason, I sold everything but my Bitcoin. I'm like, Bitcoin is like, maybe it's sentimental. It's the reason we're all here, yada, yada, yada. I kept my Bitcoin on the exchange. So the exchange kept my Bitcoin, but I never sold it. And as 2018 happened, we drip into 2019. Bitcoin doesn't die. It doesn't go to zero. It's not, there's not founders getting arrested. There's no hacks of the protocol happening. Bitcoin's just kind of being Bitcoin. And so I started to take a deeper look at it. I really found my way digging through podcasts and books, the Bitcoin Standard. There was great early on podcast. I was like listening to Tales from the Crypt incredibly early on. And it was around that time where I was like, you know what, I need to take this more seriously. And through learning the technicals of Bitcoin, through doing that, I ended up reevaluating that economics that I learned in college. And I started thinking, well, is it appropriate for the money printer to exist at the whims of a few individuals? Is that correct? Are there other ways that we can design economies, and what really is money? And you go through this entire transformation, and on the other side of that, I really found myself kind of adjusting all my priors on a lot of things that I had been taught in the past. So ended up leaving my private blockchain software job and was focused on learning more about Bitcoin. I wanted to write a book on Bitcoin, just didn't know what yet. I was kind of just, really, really into it. And a friend of mine from Minneapolis, who now works at Unchained with me, Cam Stromey on our client solutions team, He had just joined Unchained. I had been going to the Minneapolis Bitcoin meetup for a while, and there was an opening at Unchained for a technical director, and he reached out to me, and one thing led to another, and now I'm down here in Austin. But it was a period of relearning a lot of things that I had thought I knew about our economy, about how money works, about how savings works. And through relearning all of that and digesting a bunch of educational materials, I kind of found my way to now wanting to spread the word and help other individuals do the same.
Fantastic. Now, I know Unchained Capital, one of their claims to fame is their IRA product.
Mm-hmm.
For bringing your traditional IRA products over into Bitcoin and then securing them under the umbrella of that tax shelter. Mm-hmm. When you're dealing with customers, what would you say the average age of the Unchained Capital customer is? And are you noticing that age move up or down over time?
Yeah, that's a really fantastic question. And our concierge onboarding team at Unchained, we do onboard individuals to personal vaults for their personal Bitcoin, but also to IRA vaults, in that using that IRA product that you just highlighted. And anecdotally, working with concierge onboarding clients, because if you're a technical Bitcoiner, you don't have to get on the phone with one of our team members for an hour. You can just sign up for an Unchained vault and build it yourself using your own hardware wallets. But a lot of folks do like that concierge process where they talk to us one-on-one. And just anecdotally, IRA and personal, we'll include personal Bitcoin vaults in that mix. It does not skew younger by any means. I would say there's probably a bell curve with a bulk of our clients being around that 40s, 50s, early 60s age. But then there's obviously, other ends of that curve. I've worked with individuals who are, just out of high school and they're maybe going through college, but they have some Bitcoin savings. I've also worked with individuals into their 80s and 90s who have Bitcoin for, however they got into Bitcoin. Maybe they had a grandson or a niece or a nephew get them into Bitcoin and they want to secure it better and pass it on to their loved ones. So it's really all ends of the spectrum. But again, that bell curve, the middle of that bell curve, probably being around the 40s, 50s, and 60s age range.
Okay, awesome. And one of the other things that I've noticed when I'm talking to people who are a little bit later in life, because again, the point of this show, it's educational for everybody, but it does kind of tailor itself to people who are a little bit closer to retirement, people who are looking to see if they're if the financial nest eggs that they put together are going to be sufficient to hold them through retirement without having to work into their 70s or even sometimes even early 80s to keep that same lifestyle that they have. One of the things that Unchained Capital really likes to promote is the idea of multiple signature devices and not keeping all of your eggs in one basket per se, because there's a lot of apprehension from people out there that think, what if I don't trust myself? What if I lose my keys? What if I lose my device? Is my savings completely gone? So what's the solution that Unchained Capital has to answer that question?
Yeah. When it comes to Bitcoin, the way that Bitcoin is secured and kind of where Bitcoin lives, we can talk about this for a second. When there is this terminology out there, hardware wallets, or just the concept of a digital wallet in general, there are hardware wallets, which are little devices. They're little kind of supercomputers that are built with a specific purpose, and that's to help secure your private key. But these devices just secure your key. They don't store any Bitcoin. It's not like Bitcoin is in a hardware wallet. All Bitcoin, whether that's Bitcoin that you buy on Coinbase, whether that's Bitcoin that your friend secures with their hardware wallet, all Bitcoin live in Bitcoin addresses that are searchable on the blockchain. What you really want to be asking yourself is, do you hold the keys to those addresses? If you needed to move that Bitcoin out of a particular address at any point in time at whenever you want, could be 3 a.m. on a Sunday, could you do that? And do you have the sole power, and you're not going to rely on some website or some exchange to do that for you, right? If you're using Coinbase and their website goes down, can you move your Bitcoin? The answer is no. So when you hold your own keys, when you own your Bitcoin and you can control Bitcoin going in and out of Bitcoin addresses, that's where the power of self-custody shines. When you know that you're not going to be relying on a third party for the safety and security of your portion of that 21 million Bitcoin. And so at Unchained, we like to think about it as, hey, our primary goal, we want to get rid of all of your single points of failure. we're not going to be storing your Bitcoin. We're going to help you secure your Bitcoin, and we're going to do it collaboratively. We're going to do it in a way that, you don't have to trust us to be around. If we, God forbid, we go out of business or something happens to us, you still hold the keys to your Bitcoin, and we're going to teach you, how to do that. And I think at the corners, like the cornerstone of it all, what it's all built on is this foundation. And you hinted at it a little bit. It's a technology, it's a security mechanism called multi-sig, Bitcoin multi-sig security. And now Bitcoin multi-sig, we'll talk about what that means. I know there's a lot of terminology in play, and a lot of it gets kind of intimidating at the start. But what multi-sig is, imagine that there's a treasure chest. And if you wanted to open up that treasure chest, one key isn't going to do it. Imagine this treasure chest has 3 key slots. And in order to open up this treasure chest, you need 2 keys out of your set of 3. So that's what we're doing for Bitcoin security. And multi-sig, the technology, not something that Unchained invented. We didn't come up with it. We didn't, we don't have a patent on it or anything. Multi-sig is just a part of the Bitcoin protocol. And we're just leveraging that, telling people out there saying, hey, you can secure your Bitcoin in a way where you have no single points of failure. And so what we do for our clients is we help them build that digital treasure chest for their Bitcoin. We hold a key at Unchained, and then our clients hold the other 2 keys. And those keys are set up from those hardware wallets. And we help our clients on concierge onboardings set up these hardware wallets, write down their seed phrases, their sets of words that they have to keep physically secure and never put online at all. We go through all of these security procedures, and we really go step by step to help somebody go from, 0 keys being held to having a full multi-sig vault, which is the name of our product, a multi-sig vault at Unchained. We even help them move Bitcoin from an exchange into their vault, and we kind of see how the entire process works. And I think in that process of going through a concierge onboarding, there's a lot of questions that are answered throughout that process, which you can actually dig in a little bit and get your hands dirty with the material. I think it does help to bring things into the light, helps to clarify a lot of concepts that in Bitcoin, as we know, Chris, are just abstract in nature. And so really playing with this stuff, getting it in front of you and actually plugging a hardware wallet into your computer, writing down seed phrase words when you actually build it and see how it works. We like to say that we're onboarding our clients to Bitcoin and not just Unchained. We're just teaching them how Bitcoin works.
Now, that's a good point right there, and it's a good segue into another common thing that I hear is, what happens if Unchained were to go out of business? Is my Bitcoin still secure? And I think that you did a good job of answering that with the multi-sig functionality of it, of having 3 of, needing 2 of 3 keys or 3 of 5 or however many people set it up. So Unchained will hold 1 set, and the customer will have 2 other sets that they can either do keep themselves or provide 1 to themselves or 1 to their family members in case something catastrophic happens to them. What's kind of the chain of custody that Unchained Capital provides to customers in kind of family legacy as revolving around what's the word I'm looking for? If someone were to pass away, and then how would the family members be able to get access to that?
Yeah, so a couple of things there, kind of going back to the first part of what you were just speaking to. Our Unchained vaults, our personal vaults are 2 of 3, meaning you need 2 keys out of a total set of 3. And it's probably on everybody's minds, right? Especially coming out of the last, I want to say 6 months or a year. Like, what happens if Unchained goes down, right? We see all these industry participants go down. What happens if Unchained, something were to happen to us? Well, holding the keys to your own Bitcoin, when you build that treasure chest, what you also get is basically what I like to refer to as the blueprints to that treasure chest. It's called a configuration file. And it's basically a file that you can keep. You can download it. You can keep it secured in a password manager in the cloud. It's just a file that helps you know that, hey, if something happens to Unchained, you can take that backup file to your vault and go take it to another Bitcoin multi-sig software like Sparrow Wallet or Caravan. There's a couple of them out there, and you could go rebuild your vault somewhere else. You can use your 2 keys over there, and you don't need to rely on Unchained. So I know, again, there's a lot of terminology and there's a lot kind of in play there, but the point is we try to educate every step of the way. Our blog has awesome content about how to use these backup files, right? We always want to be thinking about no single points of failure. How are we a single point of failure at Unchained? And so we try to address that by letting our clients know that they do have these alternative options. Now, the second part of your question is really around inheritance. And you want to think about, okay, I have amassed some Bitcoin wealth. I have my savings in Bitcoin. But, if I were to pass away, if something was to happen to me, how can I ensure that my loved ones get access to my Bitcoin? And that's, a question that I think a lot of people should be thinking about that might not be thinking about it right now. For example, like myself, it's not, I don't think a lot of my peers have been thinking about estate planning, but I certainly have, because we've been working on an inheritance protocol product here at Unchained. And it has me thinking about, okay, I save in Bitcoin. I consider Bitcoin as my nest egg. That's how I save my money. How do I ensure that that goes where I want it to if something were to happen to me? And historically, really, the answers have been, it's either like historically it's been, well, you're going to devise a really crazy treasure map and you're going to basically leave a secret note for somebody to go on this crazy quest to recover your Bitcoin. Or you're just going to pass away and somebody is not going to be able to recover your Bitcoin because, you just never did it appropriately. You never shared how somebody can access that Bitcoin. And so what we want to do is take a good hard look at that, because it's a question from a lot of our clients. It's like, okay, this is great. I'm working with Unchained. You guys have taught me a lot. This is awesome. How do I ensure that a loved one can have access to my Bitcoin if something were to happen to me? So that's where that multi-sig model really, really shines. If you're using one hardware wallet to, secure your access to your Bitcoin, right? If you get a set of seed phrase words that you write down and you keep it secure and you have your hardware wallet device, and that's, cold storage that's holding your own keys. But if you're just using one, then basically, what you're going to want to do is make sure that your beneficiary or your executor of your estate has access to that seed phrase after you're gone. And, handling that really the entire time, you're presented with a single point of failure. If that set of 24 words, if your private key, your set of 24 words gets lost or stolen or water damage, or if your executor just doesn't understand the importance of it and loses it, it's a really, really scary spot to be in. And while you're alive, if you give your seed phrase while you're alive to your executor, well, they have your Bitcoin keys. They don't have to wait for you to pass away. They could just move your Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. So, that's a really tricky thing to think about. And then you introduce multi-sig, where not just one key can be used to move the Bitcoin, but you always need a set of 2 out of 3. That kind of opens the door a little bit. And so what we have at Unchained is an inheritance protocol that was recently launched at the end of 2022. And I think it's something that, again, just really makes it a whole lot easier for somebody who has amassed a amount of wealth in Bitcoin to be able to pass it down appropriately. Bitcoin inheritance, as I've learned from our head of legal, Jeff Vandrew, it really comes down to, there's 2 sides to the inheritance coin, no pun intended. One side of the coin is the appropriate legal structure needs to be in place, right? So what we've designed for our inheritance protocol is not the same thing as talking to an attorney and setting up an estate plan. That's kind of the legal title side of inheritance. You want to make sure that you have a trust established or a will with beneficiaries noted. You want to have that established legal structure in place for your Bitcoin. But the other side of the coin, outside of the legal title, is actually who has the keys. Because, Chris, I could legally title you to all of Satoshi's 1 million Bitcoin. That's not anything if you can't move it, if you don't have access to the Bitcoin. So you want to have both legal title and actual possession of the key. And so what our inheritance protocol is designed to do is to ensure that key succession happens. And it's really a fantastic solution. It involves copying one of those sets of seed phrase words. Again, our clients have 2 keys. You just need one of those 2 keys, copy a set of those seed phrase words, have a nice, letter to your executor and put the seed phrase words in that letter into a tamper-proof bag. Give it to one of your executors. For example, would give it to my brother, say, hey, this information is important for accessing my Bitcoin savings in the event of my demise. Please keep it safe. Now, that individual then, one, if they lose that was our risk before with just having one device and one key. If they lose it, no big deal. It's multi-sig. What we can do is work with our clients to get a new key into the rotation, and it's not going to be the be all end all of the Bitcoin. So if they lose it, that's okay. If they if I don't trust that person, if my brother opens up that tamper-proof bag and looks at my seed phrase, he still can't move my Bitcoin because my Bitcoin's in multi-sig. My Bitcoin is secured by multiple keys and not just one. So really what the power there is, it just eliminates single points of failure from your inheritance setup. And now my brother knows that, hey, let's say something tragic happens to me. He has one key. He can come to Unchained, who has the second key, and we can work with that individual to regain access to the Bitcoin. So again, I know it's a lot of information, and I've been talking for a while. I know I have a tendency to like to hear myself talk, but it's incredibly, incredibly important to keep hammering home a couple things. No single points of failure being that first thing, and diving in and getting your hands dirty and familiar with this stuff, I do think really helps in the overall education.
Yeah, on that topic, I know while you were talking about that, one of the things I was thinking about is one of the challenges my wife have had with trying to figure out who we trust enough to give our extra set of keys to isn't necessarily whether we trust them to be moral people or to have the best interests of our children in mind when executing our trust and will, should that time happen. Hopefully it never does happen. But do they understand Bitcoin well enough to really understand the importance of the wealth that we're providing to them? And on the surface, it just seems like, well, my brother would be great, or my sister would be great, or whatever. But if they don't really understand Bitcoin and what it really is, and what it can mean to our children's financial future, it can still be one of those things where there's a concept in sales, like people don't value free. So to them, Bitcoin has no value, right? Because they don't really understand the protocol. They're not really doing the research on it. They don't understand money they understand money on a surface level, but not really with any depth.
Right.
So who do you give it to? Because it's not just like, okay, here's my trust, can you sell my house? Can you take my bank accounts? Can you, because they know all of that stuff. So Bitcoin is a little bit of a different beast to kind of understand in that respect. So it's great to have another company like Unchained Capital, who can also be used as an educational platform for a beneficiary or for an executor to talk to and get the education that they need to in order to really understand what this thing is.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, choosing your executor who is going to be the recipient of that private key material, that is solely up to you. And, we can't give legal opinion there. That would be definitely within, your, however you feel comfortable and confident in passing on that key material. But kind of the beautiful thing is, compared to a situation where you're holding your Bitcoin keys and you're just using one key to secure your Bitcoin, and you give that to a careless individual who maybe not even is intentionally careless, but just doesn't value Bitcoin, right? They're like, whatever, and they end up just losing that seed phrase. That's scary. Multi-sig does afford for, a little bit more education time to come into play for that individual, right? Say you give them that private key material and that inheritance protocol, and then that person just doesn't really think about Bitcoin the same way you and I might. Well, one, if they lose that private key material, that's okay. This is multi-sig. We can, work with our clients to help them better themselves in that situation. But also, it does then give that individual time to say, okay, put your guard down. It's okay if you lose it. Ideally, you wouldn't want to lose it. But if you do, it's not the end of the world. And really then, as somebody who's trusting my beneficiary, I would want to, as best I can, instill some Bitcoin education, share some educational resources, really lean into the education, not from the perspective of my own inheritance, but also for the betterment of whoever I'm talking to, right? I want my brother to learn about Bitcoin and think about it the same way I do. And so there's a little bit of skin in the game when you trust somebody enough to give them, an important part of your Bitcoin savings from an inheritance perspective. they kind of have skin in the game to go learn about this stuff more, or at least I would hope so. But yeah, I would just be thinking about always furthering the education and the mission behind helping folks understand and I guess go down the rabbit hole, so to speak, because it really does suck people in. And if that, if your executor goes from not really caring about Bitcoin to being all in, researching it, and taking the dive, that's a pretty cool win. Just for like the generational line, I would think.
So let me put together kind of maybe a real world scenario and just get your thoughts on it. So the signing device, there's lots of different signing devices out there. You have a ledger, you have a Trezor, you have a cold card, you have, whatever XYZ company. In the years to come, there'll probably be several more options. But the passwords and the keys that we're talking about is really a series of either 12 or 24 individual words, correct?
Correct.
So if I were to say, take those words and I were to inscribe them on a piece of metal or something like that, something that's a little bit more longer lasting than a piece of paper, which many people have lost their Bitcoin on in a flood or in a fire or something like that. And I were to split those, if I had one signing device, but if I were to split up the keys per se, these 24 seed phrases, and give those to other people, would I have the same sort of security as long as those other people were able to put those keys together? And then if my signing device was destroyed, could they still get access to the Bitcoin with those 24 words?
Yeah, so a couple things here. There's let's say that I take a set of 24 words. That's represents my private key to my Bitcoin. It's 24 words for your listeners. These aren't just completely random words, and you don't get to choose the words. There's basically a word bank, a master word bank in Bitcoin of 2,048 words. And these little hardware wallet devices, as Chris was mentioning, ledgers and Trezors and cold cards, they generate at random a set of 12 or 24 words for you to write down, and that is your Bitcoin key. Now, to Chris, your question, you have your 24 words and you have them written down. Let's say I'm going to split those off into different sets of 6 or something like that. And I have 6 words apiece, and I give those 6 words to 4 individuals. I'm splitting up my seed, and then, that's hardware wallet breaks or whatever. Would those individuals be able to come together and restore that Bitcoin seed into a hardware wallet device and have access to your Bitcoin? From a technical perspective, those individuals would be able to do that. Now, there'd be a lot of things to remember there. The seed phrase words, if you're given 24 words, they do need to be in order when they're reconstructed, right, into a hardware wallet. So you need to find, okay, who's the person that has words 1 through 6? Okay, great. Who's the person that has words 7 through 12? And so on and so forth. And what you'd be able to do is find a hardware wallet device, one of these signing devices. You'd be able to load those 24 words up in order into that device and gain access to the Bitcoin. Now, while that's technically feasible, what that type of solution to inheritance planning is riddled with is single points of failure. You are now, instead of just having one single point of failure with one set of 24 words, you actually now have 4 single points of failure. If any one of those 4 individuals, mishandles or loses their 6 words that they've been assigned, that is a single point of failure, and you would fail to reconstruct that key. So when you're in a solution like multisig, you're not splitting your seed phrase words. You are actually creating 3 separate keys. And there's one key with us held at Unchained, but let's say you were just doing your own multisig. You would have 3 separate keys. And if you lose one entire key, one entire list of 24 words, that's okay. That's not going to be the end of the world because you have 2 other keys there. So, there's different ways to think about Bitcoin security, and it's incredibly fun to think about. But at the end of the day, like, again, harping back on that single point of failure aspect, that's where I would kind of avoid the seed splitting mechanism as a way to access the Bitcoin.
Okay. And just to kind of reiterate, the idea behind the hardware wallet is that device is basically it's connected to those 24 words, password protected is really all that it is. And then that becomes the key to unlock the vault that has your Bitcoin stored in the digital realm that can be used anywhere in the world.
Yeah, exactly. You have a collection of addresses, Bitcoin addresses that you control. And, if you want to move Bitcoin from those addresses, that's where you'd really leverage those devices. You would say, okay, this device, when we're talking about those seed phrase words, like the 24 or 12 words, those words are really only ever to be used if you need to like restore a device. Let's say you're using a Trezor device, this little black looking device. It generates you 24 words. You write down those words or you stamp them into steel yourself or something like Chris was mentioning. Then you just lock those words away, you hide those words away, and you use your device to move your Bitcoin on the Bitcoin blockchain. But these Trezor devices, as we all know with hardware is not perfect, right? And these little Trezor devices could go to the bottom of the ocean or get smashed with a hammer. Something could happen to that actual device, and that's okay. All you'd need to do is get a new Bitcoin hardware wallet, a new signing device. It doesn't even have to be the same brand. It could be a ledger, it could be a cold card, and you could take those 24 words and reload them into a new device, and you'd regain access to your key. That's why those seed phrase words, oftentimes what's appended onto that seed phrase designation is seed phrase backup, because what they really are, they're just a backup to your key.
So could you have a Trezor, a ledger, and a cold card all connected to one account, or do they have to all be the same type of device?
For Unchained vaults specifically, or multi-sig in general?
Multi-sig in general.
Yeah, multi-sig in general. It's as long as it's a Bitcoin, is you're generating a valid Bitcoin seed phrase. It doesn't matter where it came from. So if you wanted to, have your own multi-sig setup. You wanted 3 total keys with 2 keys at any time being able to move the Bitcoin. You could build a multi-sig setup with a Trezor, a ledger, and a cold card, and have 3 separate brands and manufacturers of these devices. But at the end of the day, you're generating Bitcoin keys, and Bitcoin keys are device agnostic.
Cool. So what's the most common question you get when you're walking someone through this process? And have we covered it?
So I would say the most common question, there's quite a few common questions about, is my Bitcoin in my Trezor? And we've definitely covered that. It's like the Bitcoin is never in the device. These devices are just your keys to your Bitcoin addresses. Another common question I get asked is, we do help people build their multi-sig vaults, and oftentimes these individuals have Bitcoin on exchanges like a Coinbase or a Kraken or a Binance or a Swan Bitcoin or something like that. And a lot of folks, especially if they're brand new to holding their own Bitcoin keys, they say, well, okay, how is my vault and me using these devices and these seed phrases, how is that more secure than me? I want to let Coinbase secure my Bitcoin because I don't trust myself. It's like I would mess something up. I think my funds are safer elsewhere. So how is holding my own keys safer? That's a really common question. And again, it's like, not to beat a dead horse, but it's thinking about that single point of failure aspect. And that's what I always go back to. And it kind of reared its head earlier this summer when the Coinbase 10Q documents came out, and it was stipulated right there that, you are essentially an unsecured creditor of these exchanges, right? When you buy Bitcoin at a Bitcoin or cryptocurrency exchange, that is an IOU. You don't own the Bitcoin. You don't own the Bitcoin unless you can control it with your own keys. In those instances, your exchange, whoever your counterparty is, they control the Bitcoin. So while you might, at the onset, if you're brand new to all this, you think, okay, my Bitcoin's safer with them. Well, all it takes is an exchange to get hacked, a rogue employee at the exchange, a bad actor inside the exchange. It could take, as we've seen quite clearly over the course of the past couple of months, malpractice within the exchange and lending out customer funds somewhere else, right? You don't have clarity into all that when you don't hold the keys to your own Bitcoin. So the counterparty risk, the engaging with a counterparty and letting them secure your Bitcoin wealth is a massive single point of failure. And when you make the move to holding your own keys, you can do so in ways that helps you know that you're going to eliminate your single points of failure. And that's really where multi-sig shines again. So common question is, because a lot of times folks, for better or worse, they just don't know about what they're presented with as single points of failure when they keep their Bitcoin on these exchanges. They might think that they're FDIC insured. They might think that, they're not moving my Bitcoin. I can see my number in my account. I log into Coinbase and I see I have 10 Bitcoin there. So clearly it's not moving. But at the end of the day, you shouldn't be trusting these exchanges. Their incentive is to get you to give them your money. Now, we all need to access Bitcoin somewhere. Some people mine for it. Some people go to exchanges. Using exchanges inherently is not bad. But I would say trusting these exchanges to secure your wealth, that is a bad practice when you're working with Bitcoin, and you should be holding Bitcoin with your own keys.
Yeah, that's definitely something we've seen with this whole FTX thing, where it turned out the however many thousands of Bitcoin that they said that they had in customer accounts, they didn't actually have. So that money was already rehypothecated. And if a customer were to say, before they went bankrupt, the customer would say, okay, I want to take my Bitcoin out. What the exchange would do behind the scenes is they would literally buy the Bitcoin, then take the profit or the loss, whatever it was, and then send it to you in representation that they had it all along, which it turns out that they didn't have. Another big question that I get a lot from people who are a little bit later in life and haven't done a lot of research on Bitcoin is they say, well, hasn't Bitcoin been hacked? And I am constantly telling them, no, the Bitcoin protocol has never been hacked. The single points of failure of companies that have built on top of Bitcoin, those are what gets hacked. Those are the exchanges. Those are the what other stuff.
Or, if you, and that's an excellent point. And it's something kind of within technology, speaking in absolutes, right, has never been hacked. It's sounds too good to be true, right? But and then there's newspaper headlines or, certain mainstream media headlines will say Bitcoin hack results in $2 million loss or something like that. If you read beyond the headline, it's exactly right, Chris, to your point. What you read is either an exchange was hacked because they didn't secure their keys properly, or an individual was hacked because instead of writing down my 24 words onto paper and then putting them into metal, I just decided to put them in the Notes app on my phone, and somebody got those words off of my Notes app and stole my Bitcoin, right? There's hacks that happen of honeypots at exchanges where there's a bunch of Bitcoin in one spot, and there's hacks that happen to steal people's private keys. But there's not the Bitcoin network, the Bitcoin protocol has never been hacked. And in fact, the Bitcoin protocol, it just works, right? I mean, price movement, volatility, Bitcoin going up and down in price, that is one thing. And we're humans, and our psychology works in the way that we've assigned a dollar price to Bitcoin, and we watch the dollar price and we gauge that as Bitcoin's success, which certainly is a component of Bitcoin's success. But as a Bitcoiner, as somebody who lives and breathes and works every day in this world, my version of Bitcoin success is the Bitcoin blockchain still functioning? Are we still getting blocks being processed every 10 minutes on average? If I send a transaction of Bitcoin to Chris, is that going to reach his wallet, and is it going to get confirmed? And the answer is yes. So, with Bitcoin as a network is strong. Nodes are coming online. We're seeing blocks still being produced. Mining has now kind of decentralized around the world, more so than just being really compact into China over the course of the past 24 months. It's really spectacular. And so it does take a lot for folks to kind of look past the dollar price, which of course matters, right? We want Bitcoin to be valuable, but it's an asset undergoing price discovery in real time. And you can't just print more of it. So naturally, the value in dollar terms is going to fluctuate. But in overall success of the network, it's been incredibly successful and has been now for 14 years. And like you say, I think a lot of the headlines might lead you to believe that there is a hack in Bitcoin, but what's actually being hacked is really poor security of Bitcoin funds.
Yeah, most recently in the news, there was that gentleman who's a Bitcoin core developer. Hold on one second. I'm having
all good.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yeah.
Sorry about that.
No, all good.
What I was saying was, most recently there was a news article about a Bitcoin core developer who lost 100 or 200 Bitcoin. And kind of to your point, and so the media would have you believe that, well, if a Bitcoin core developer can lose Bitcoin, what kind of security does that mean for anybody else who isn't as technically advanced in understanding of Bitcoin? But the reality is we're all human and we all
Right.
make risk decisions every single day. Um, and so this particular individual, he didn't have his Bitcoin in cold storage in one of these uh, hardware wallets like we're talking about. He had his coins in what was called a hot wallet, which
Mhm.
is a wallet that is online that does have an attack vector because it is online. And his coins were, I guess, stolen that way. And it reminds me of another story about 2 years ago with a pipeline. This was a Columbia pipeline or Colonial pipeline.
Mhm.
And the hacker hacked the pipeline, stopped the flow of oil, and said, "Give me $5 million in Bitcoin, and I'll release the software back to you so that you can run your pipeline." And
Right.
after about a week and a half, the company decided, okay, fine, we're going to pay them. And I think it was something like they got it down to like $4.8 million in Bitcoin or something like that. And half of that Bitcoin, the $2.4 million of it, the hacker put on a hot wallet. Well, what the FBI was able to do, because the Bitcoin blockchain is not completely anonymous, it's pseudo anonymous. So you can see how Bitcoin moves around the network. So they could see the address that the Bitcoin originated in and the Bitcoin and then the address that the Bitcoin went to, which was the access that the hacker had. And then so the FBI could take a look at that and see how that wallet was stored. And they realized it was on a hot wallet. And then they subpoenaed the hot wallet company to freeze those assets and gain custody to those assets. And they were able to get the Bitcoin back to the company that it was stolen from. And so, even a guy who's smart enough to know how to hack a pipeline and to leverage that
Mm.
to get money, even he didn't store it correctly.
Yeah,
So
it's truly I mean, you can be, you can still be well on your Bitcoin journey to learning about what makes Bitcoin the best money in the world. You can read more about mining. You can be very early on in that journey. And if you're securing your Bitcoin properly, then you're good to go, right? And you point out some perfect examples. You can, shoot yourself in the foot by overcomplicating things or being unintentionally negligent, no matter how smart you are. So really focusing in on like, okay, I'm going to secure my Bitcoin first, and then maybe I'll do a deep dive into the Lightning Network or Bitcoin mining or some really cool aspects of Bitcoin. But you don't need to be a pro programmer engineer to secure your Bitcoin with ironclad security. You just need to make sure to not use hot wallets for significant amounts of funds to secure your Bitcoin. And with that Bitcoin core developer, there's actually a perfect, like, somebody asked him in the comments, were you using multi-sig? And he just goes, no. It's like, that would have eliminated your single point of failure. So yeah, I think you raise really good points. It's like, you don't have to be having the best Bitcoin security that's available out there does not move in tandem with you being incredibly whip smart about Bitcoin and super technical. And I think that is like often a very big misconception when it comes to Bitcoin security. I often say that like setting up a Bitcoin multi-sig or even just setting up a hardware wallet and properly securing your Bitcoin, it's kind of like if you see the cartoon visual of, there's a shadow of something coming around the corner and it looks like a lion and it's super scary, and it finally comes around the corner and it's just a little mouse. I think that's what Bitcoin self-custody is a little bit, right? It seems there's a lot of words and terminology at the onset, but when you actually go through it and do it, you're like, wow, this is pretty straightforward and easy. And now I feel much more confident in my setup.
yeah, on average, how long would you say it takes to set up your hardware wallet?
So one hardware wallet, if you are walking through the process and if it's your first time doing it by yourself, maybe about 30 minutes or so. When we do our multi-sig calls with our clients, and we oftentimes, it's really often the case, we from straight at opening up the packaging and taking out a Trezor or a Ledger, setting it up 2 devices and then building a multi-sig vault with us, those calls are about an hour long, and they usually go over just a little bit so we can actually talk about how to use the vault. But it's not like you need to go through a week-long boot camp on how to do something.
Yeah, I know when I'm helping my friends, I can only say friends, I can't say family yet, that are starting to get into Bitcoin. And especially in the last 6 months with everything that's happened in the space, they really have been focused a lot on self-custody and
Mhm.
setting up their hardware wallets. When I am helping them set up, one of the things I like to talk to them about is I ask them, I say, have you ever used the Bitcoin network before? Have you ever sent funds over the Bitcoin network?
Yeah.
Because at some point you have to get it from the exchange over to the signing device and or into your vault for the signing device. And they go, no. And I say, okay, well, here's what you want to do. You want to take it step by step. You want to go slowly. You don't want to send it all at once. You want to get comfortable sending it because it's not like a bank account or a Venmo where it's instantaneous. It could take 10 minutes to an hour, or it could take 2 seconds, just depending on how much traffic is going through the Bitcoin
Yeah.
network and how quickly the blocks are being established or mined. And so you send a test transaction, whether it be $1 or $2 or 50 cents or $100, depending on how much money you're ultimately going to be sending. And you may have to do it 2 or 3 times until you feel comfortable enough sending that before you then go ahead and send the majority or all of the Bitcoin over to its final destination.
Yeah.
And I know when I did it the first time, I was sweating bullets. I didn't have somebody like you who could walk me through the process. I didn't know anybody. This was back in early 2017 when it was kind of like the last class of
Mhm.
Bitcoin maximalist OGs, I guess we could consider yourself as, or we could consider ourselves as now. But we were really doing it on our own, and we were just trying to find resources online, and there wasn't really anybody that we could talk to. Now there's so many more resources and so many more people who have such a good understanding. And in 2017, Unchained Capital didn't exist, as far as I'm aware. So
Yeah, so we existed as a company, but we founded in 2016, but it was really our Bitcoin collateralized loans, kind of was the first really established product of our business. And then we moved into multi-sig vaults later on 2019, at the end of 2019, going into 2020. So yeah, I mean, the education that's out there is phenomenal. Efforts like this, like awesome podcasts, have just been a really good source of information for me personally. I love to listen to things as I'm driving or mowing the lawn or doing things like that. It really does help it constantly instill something new to learn too, which I think is really fun.
yeah, I mean, me as a Bitcoiner, I use the Bitcoin network from time to time. When we went down to El Salvador this in the middle of 2022, we used a lot of Bitcoin down there, and I had my Moon wallet set up, and I was transferring money from the exchange over to the Moon wallet, and then the Moon wallet, I was buying goods and services, whether it be hotel stays or groceries or restaurant purchases or buying stuff from vendors on the beach. There's not everybody down there is using it, but there is a growing amount of people who are using it and who understand it.
Yeah.
But at the beginning, it was very stressful because there's something about having the education, and then there's something about using the education, and that's a leap of faith basically. So after you do it a couple times, you realize, oh my gosh, this is even easier than using my debit card or my credit card or writing a check or something like that. And the money arrives faster at those places at final settlement, so that I can
Right.
then spend it. It's nothing like the money's being put on hold in my bank account for 3 days. I don't have somebody asking me, what is this transaction all about? I'm not in a foreign country. I'm trying to use my debit card, and all of a sudden my debit card gets frozen because the bank is like, oh, well, he's never made this transaction before. His account probably got stolen. Then I got to
Right.
call 1-800 numbers and sit on hold for 20 minutes. And, and this whole back and forth, I got to sign affidavits, so it's one of the great things about Bitcoin. And
Oh
kind
yeah.
of change subjects a little bit here. We got a little bit of time left. I know you have a hard stop here in about 25 minutes, but I'm interested to hear from you. Once you went down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, what are some of the other rabbit hole ideas that you began learning about that up until you discovered Bitcoin, you never thought you cared about?
Oh, that's an excellent question. I've actually thought about this a lot. I remember I talked about something similar with John Vallis when I was talking to him a couple of years ago now at this point. One of the things like these could be rabbit holes outside of Bitcoin, correct?
Outside of Bitcoin, yeah, not
Yeah.
a Bitcoin rabbit hole.
So this is actually, well, not eating seed oils is a very big
It's a popular one.
Yeah, that's a popular one. There's actually this food truck in Austin called Ziki, and shout out to Ziki in Austin. They advertise like on the side of their food truck, no seed oils. And then you go to their website and it says, you are being poisoned. And it's just like, it's almost like, I mean, I think they do accept Bitcoin too. I think they're on the Oshi app, but it's like a Bitcoiner is running the business. And we just got it for lunch here today. So that's pretty cool. I would say on that, in the spirit of no seed oils though, I'm really with that, you know, it's talked about a lot on Twitter and, you know, stuff like that. But what it boils down to is, I think finding value from your food sources and not just eating processed food, right? When you save in Bitcoin, you understand value. We think in long-term, low time preference, right? I want to be here when I'm 85, 90, 95 plus years old, right? And it starts with treating my body right now. I want to have a low time preference for myself and my physical health. And so part of that comes with kind of going against the grain, traditional health, you know, the food pyramid, right? They tell us that, you know, XYZ foods are good for you. Well, they also tell us that, you know, the inflation's not super high, right? So like being a little bit more, I would say, not so quick to accept what is told to you from whether it's popular media outlets or the studies have concluded and the X is, we know X is Y. It's like, well, have we, you know, the whole point of science and thinking about things is to constantly disprove things with new information. So I've kind of taken, because I had to go through that relearning period with economics as I got into Bitcoin, I'm kind of relearning health a little bit. I'm relearning wellness, and I'm thinking about, you know, how can I put the right food into my body to help me live longer? Or what should I be avoiding? So that's one core area would be, I think, health in terms of food consumption. And then the other thing, it's not a rabbit hole necessarily, but it's something that I just find fascinating about Bitcoiners is, and maybe it's working with a lot of Bitcoiners or going to Bitcoin events a lot, whether it's in Minneapolis or down here in Austin. Families, strong families, a lot of young children. It's like, you know, a lot of my peers that I work with here at Unchained are like having children at a crazy rate. And it's fun for me. I don't have any kids yet, but just the inspiration that's there and the excitement around wanting to bring children into the world, into hopefully a world that is on a Bitcoin standard. I think when you get really sucked into a lot of mainstream narratives and a lot of the way people talk about what the future is going to look like, and it's very dystopic. It's very there's not a very positive bent on how people think about the future. And so some folks are, you know, even, and hey, everybody makes their own personal decisions, but there's a lot of, you know, I don't want to, you know, bring a child into the world because they're going to grow up and it's going to be this terrible, disastrous capitalistic world. And it's like, you know, I'm around people every day who are really inspired by families and by like what the next generation could live in, what the world could be like. And I just really love that optimism. So I guess the rabbit hole there would be thinking about, you know, and I'm not there yet with children, but I would like to be one day, and like thinking about how I can provide and produce value for my local community or for the world, maybe doing things here at Unchained. Like I really have kind of thought about that more than ever before, which is kind of a crazy thing to say out loud now that I think about it. But yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, that's great. You know, one of the other rabbit holes that I found myself going down to, and I guess it's kind of Bitcoin related, is this whole topic of energy consumption. You know, right now there's a big ESG movement in the United States and around the world through the World Economic Forum, and governments are really pressing their states, at least here in the United States and in Europe, to reduce the amount of CO2 emissions and greenhouse effects on the environment. And they've pinpointed Bitcoin as being one of the contributing factors to, you know, the destruction of the environment, you know, along with cows. So now not only are they trying to get rid of our meat, they're also trying to get rid of our ability to secure individual wealth. And I know you listen a lot to and read a lot of the stuff from Alex Gladstein. And I'd be interested to hear your perspective, and if it comes up in conversations with customers, on the environmental impacts of Bitcoin And is it a net negative to future generations?
Yeah, that's also a very good rabbit hole, right? Energy consumption. And I mean, I'm living down in Texas where, I think the Houston Bitcoin meetup is very energy focused, right? A lot of natural gas folks who are maybe traditionally gas men and women who've been working in that their whole life are kind of now seeing the power of Bitcoin, returning basically a stranded asset into value and using flared gas to mine Bitcoin and this sorts of things. There's kind of like an interesting energy and Bitcoin marriage going on in many areas. And with that comes like, okay, I need to learn a little bit more about energy. And I know that Parker Lewis is also, has been doing the same thing over the course of the past year, really is becoming kind of an energy guy too, as he's taken a deeper dive into this stuff.
And he's on the board of directors at Unchained now, correct?
Yes. Yeah. So Parker, and recently, I will kind of pump this up too, recently came out with a new Gradually Then Suddenly piece for his Gradually Then Suddenly series. So a new essay from Parker Lewis, which I definitely suggest your listeners go check out. And actually thinking about your broader listener base, Chris, if they haven't, Parker Lewis, who's now on our board of directors, was formerly our head of business development here at Unchained. He writes on Bitcoin in a way that, I've shared it with friends and family. It's really in a way that nobody else writes about Bitcoin. He approaches Bitcoin from first principles. He used to work in legacy finance. And I would encourage all listeners to go check out Parker Lewis's essay series. He talks about in separate articles, all of the common counter narratives to Bitcoin. He kind of takes on the head one by one and just discusses these topics really in depth and in very, very well. They're rather long articles, so if it's the weekend and you have some time, would definitely suggest going to check those out. But with energy in general, it's not really something that clients bring up on calls, and maybe they're self-selecting for that, right? If you have Bitcoin and you're wanting to secure it, you don't care as much about the fact that Bitcoin does consume energy, which I don't think should be viewed as a bad thing. But we don't have a lot of clients actively talking to us about that. But it is an interesting area and something that I've been trying to learn more about. And one of the things right off the bat, this was maybe back in 2020, was consuming energy is not bad. Maybe the inputs can be tinkered with, and that's something maybe we should think about more. You don't necessarily want to run an entire Bitcoin mining facility off of coal power. Just being realistic about it, having some sort of renewable or somewhat cleaner input would be nice. So I think a lot of people are very quick to assume that just because there's a Bitcoin mining facility, that it's like for some reason dirty, or being powered by a less than desirable source of energy. But at the same time, thinking about how important fossil fuels and how important energy production has been to the advancement of society, like you look at it and you start to think, okay, consuming and using energy isn't bad. And then also, what are you juxtaposing it with? What are we trying to replace? Central banking also consumes a lot of energy, right? And that there's a massive amount of, if you want to call it a carbon footprint, sure. There's a increasingly large carbon footprint that exists right now with the legacy financial system and modern banking. And so it's like, I think that fingers are maybe being pointed at Bitcoin from people who don't understand what it's setting out to replace, right? I mean, if we had that same level of scrutiny applied to other things, not just legacy finance, but the common example is like, washing machines. If there's the same level of scrutiny applied to the energy consumption of washing machines, then, why aren't there 10,000 word hate articles about washing machines? Maybe there are, but it just is kind of like, thinking about things as if I'm Parker Lewis, really digging into the first principles. I personally think that, incentives are going to align. And if that's in kind of this energy marriage, that's going to happen over the course of the next decade. And I do think that Bitcoin's energy consumption overall is going to be a non-issue, especially when you have folks like Gladstein who are looking at Bitcoin being used worldwide and the economic empowerment and property rights that it's instilling to individuals around the globe. Like when that's happening, and the most that somebody can point to is saying, okay, well, but it's using a lot of energy. It's like, so what at that point is
Yeah,
kind of my thought
yeah,
towards it.
yeah. No, definitely. I think what people realize once they get into Bitcoin, and I know some of the people listening here, I hope aren't Bitcoiners yet, but are interested in Bitcoin and looking for more information on how to get it, how to store it, how to send it, how to use it. That's what this podcast is really all about. As most people know, the general form of this podcast is to help people who are later in life kind of understand Bitcoin from people who are their own ages. But I wanted to have Tyler on the call here today because he's such an expert in self-custody of Bitcoin, which is a paramount part of getting involved in Bitcoin. There's a saying in Bitcoin, don't trust, verify, which is the exact opposite of kind of what Reagan had said, trust but verify. In Bitcoin, we believe don't trust, verify, which in a lot of cases turns us into the conspiracy theorists of the family because we're always asking the question why on anything. And as you get into Bitcoin and you start realizing all the fears that you had about it were really just put in your own mind, and then you start looking at some of the other lessons that the traditional education and financial systems have taught us, we start realizing that, oh my gosh, there's an awful lot of gaslighting going out there. And it doesn't take too much time to navigate through all that and remove the veil and kind of see what the incentives are behind the media news that we're getting. And so you'll start learning more about health. You'll start learning more about fitness. You'll start learning more about how our food is created. You'll start learning more about greenhouse emissions and the World Economic Forum and central banking and all sorts of different type of stuff. So really getting into Bitcoin is like opening up a book that really is a breath of fresh air that inspires prosperity and happiness moving forward. Where all the traditional media is going to give you right now is doom and gloom and how everything is going to hell in a handbasket. So
Yeah,
I was really excited to have Tyler on the show today. I hope all of you out there got a lot of good information from Tyler on how to set up your own hardware wallets and how to understand some of the lingo involved in that space a little bit better. Tyler, if you could just give us a quick little handoff on how people can get in touch with you if they have more questions and how they can reach out to Unchained Capital and get started.
Yeah, no, thank you, Chris, for having me on. With whether it's Bitcoin podcast or you're talking about Bitcoin, it's not lost on me or Chris that there's a lot of terminology in play. There's a lot of newness, right? And I would just encourage anybody listening to really take to heart that just because it's new and unfamiliar does not necessarily mean that it's hard or scary. If you're setting up a hardware wallet for the first time, just going through the setup process and following, a YouTube video, just by setting it up, that doesn't mean your life savings is automatically transferred to a Bitcoin key. You can set it up and play with it and get comfortable. And a second point that I would really like to just mention before I give a formal sign off for those of you listening is, Bitcoin should really, really, really be kept separate from crypto. Bitcoin is not quote unquote crypto as the way, a lot of headlines might make it out to be. Bitcoin is digital scarcity discovered once 14 years ago, maybe not discovered, but we could say created. And it's really, really special and it's being adopted at a breakneck pace. People are taking it seriously. I help individuals secure their wealth in Bitcoin. Crypto is a casino of a bunch of people that just want to end up taking your Bitcoin. So just want to make that point again. It's like, I'd be remiss if I didn't. Like my colleague Phil Geiger says, printing money does not produce value. So coming up with a new token does not produce value, right? So Bitcoin's 21 million hard cap supply, that's value. So as you think about crypto, just make sure you're divorcing the ideas of Bitcoin and crypto. But yeah, I mean, my passion is talking about Bitcoin and educating. If you're on Twitter, I am at clockwork_prior on Twitter. That's where I post some interesting things about Bitcoin education content. Starting to get back into that a little bit more this year than I did last year. So definitely give me a follow there. And then our Unchained Capital blog, I think, is fantastic. Not just for our clients. We write about Bitcoin topics, the importance of seed phrases. We're really trying to be a great educational resource. So that is blog.unchained.com. And then if you want to get in touch with me about Concierge and my team, and you want to talk deeper about setting up these things and securing your wealth, that would be unchained.com/concierge. We'll be able to help you out.
Great. And I'm so happy that you finished it off with crypto is not Bitcoin. And remember, folks, we started this conversation with his background, and he worked for a blockchain company.
Yes.
So it's Bitcoin. It's not blockchain.
Yes, couldn't have said it better myself. Chef's kiss.
Thank you so much for being on the show, Tyler. I hope to do this again at a later date. Have a great day.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it.
All right, now let's see if I can get my computer to